So, greetings everyone to Slack community info and updates at SC Mumbai. So my name is Niamh. As I said, I'm based in the Slack Dublin office, where I've never been, by the way, but I imagine it's very nice. People seem really nice on the internet. What Slack community is, so it is chapters. We have the city-based chapters, with the idea being that hopefully someday, perhaps not too far away in the future, we can meet people in real life again. But yeah, currently everything is virtual. So these are chapters for meetup style groups who are dedicated volunteers, people who want to spread their passion for Slack to their local community, or simply if you are curious, you are interested, you want to learn more or learn a bit about like other people globally. Maybe you're just going to see, maybe you want to sit back and observe some of the things that people have been doing on Slack. Slack community is the place for you. So Slack community in numbers, there are now 10,000 plus members. We're so close to like 11,000, but it would be wrong to say it. So we are over 10,000 members that use our Slack community workspace. Globally, there are 96 chapters, and this is constantly growing, where we're trying to get presence, especially if you've got some colleagues perhaps in Korea. That's one of the hotspot places that we're hoping to grow in the future, or perhaps in other parts of the world. But yeah, there are also 15 chapters in India, which in my mind are, I'm pretty sure this is probably the most prolific country for groups of Slack community, and also has a huge amount of events. And onto events, there are on average, give or take, about 100 events held yearly. And that's a mixture between the different events that are held by the city-specific chapter groups, or also we host events for Slack community members, where usually we host at least one monthly AMA where we invite people from Slack. We've previously had Stuart Butterfield, yeah, just, you know, the head of Slack. He's also joined us for an AMA, and we've also had some people who are involved in the recent Salesforce acquisition, or the acquisition of Slack by Salesforce, such as Tamar. But yeah, so we try and have at least one monthly event hosted by us, and then as many events as possible held locally. So just to show you, if you go onto slackcommunity.com, you can explore by region. Here, like, I know that a lot of you based on time zone are possibly going to be based in Asia, and so you can see that India flag is dotting up all over the place. Know that you are not required to only go to events that are in your local city. Join any chapter that you think will be interesting for you. Maybe you're curious, maybe you've got some colleagues there. You are welcome to join any chapter. All events are totally open to absolutely everybody. And yeah, don't feel restricted even to just join ones in India. Like, again, time zone wise, we have a very new chapter that we only created this week for Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Also, again, there's chapters globally. So if you see an event, even if it's not in your time zone, I would suggest registering for it, so that way you'll be able to get updated when the recording is released. So yeah, check out slackcommunity.com. And for example, some upcoming events. Well, in 2 days' time in Pimpri Chinchwad, we're having driving engagement and improving productivity on Slack. That's going to be joined with, I can't remember offhand the presenter's name, but we have a guest from Poppins, which is a company that has built its really robust app on Slack. Then we're going to have the Slack community introduction. Now, I know that I will pronounce that name wrong, and I don't want to, but going by the chapter leader, Praneeth, he's referring to it as Vizag. So Slack community Vizag, is that the local nickname for the city? That is going to be opening up on the 15th. And again, you're more than welcome to join this welcome event. And then at the end, well, towards the end of the month, Successful Hybrid Workplace powered by Slack. So this is going to be hosted by our Bangalore community. And also what they have is the guest speaker, with Suzanne Kutar, who is the head of people operations across India. And so you'll have a Slack speaker talking about what our plans are for the future, and how we're going to have this hybrid model of partially working from home, partially working in office, or at people's discretion, and how that's going to look. Now, big news here is introducing forums. So this is such big news. It was only released last night. That's how fresh this news is. So I implore you all to check out forums.slackcommunity.com. And this is where we're going to have more forum based. So we are going to continue to use the workspace, and this is going to be for all of our chat and communications. But the idea with the forum is, you know, like when you're using a workspace, it's not always the easiest place to sift through to find answers to your very specific questions, whereas forums are pretty good for doing that. So you can use the forum in conjunction with the Slack workspace. There's just a little app that you need to enable, and yeah, it's already not looking totally empty, which for a forum that is, I would say, about 18 hours old, that's quite promising. And yeah, if you have any very specific questions, or if you want to contribute to answers, we highly encourage people to suggest their answers, solutions, workarounds, or even some feedback. And yeah, feel free to use these forums and get to grow your network, answer, help, get involved. You're more than welcome here. So yeah, even if you don't have time for events, or you might have a quick question, check out forums.slackcommunity.com. And with that, that is all the major updates from me. So I will stop sharing and give you back to Bhoomin.
Thanks, Niamh. Wonderful things are upcoming on the Slack community. And I recently checked into the forums, and it is awesome. I really loved the way it is formed. Also, I am happy that Indian community is also active and doing wonderful events in near future. And of course, to the audiences, those who are present here, I wish to tell that Niamh had been the main source of inspiration as well as support all throughout in tough times. And whenever we need anything to consult with her, she is available. It is many thanks to Niamh.
No problem, pal.
And now I shall be starting my presentation. I hope you are able to see it. So when you go to the Slack app home, which is at api.slack.com/apps, you get to have many options to create your apps. You can use JSON block codes by using block kits. You can create your workflows. You can create admin apps, etc., etc. There are several options. You can use Bolt for your coding in JavaScript, Java, Python, and Ruby. And every Slack app has an access to range of APIs that provide access to read, write, and update many types of data in Slack. There are three main APIs that are very important. One is Event API. It has got around 85 event types. Web API, which has around 125 plus Web API HTTP methods. They are grouped under apps, auth, chat, conversations, file, reaction, reminders, etc. And socket mode is used when you don't want to expose your HTTP endpoints to third parties and for security reasons. So socket mode allows you to for your app to communicate with Slack via runtime WebSocket URLs created in real time. Just a minute, I'm just sharing it again. Now, here is what your Slack API does. Slack API resides in the center, and user sends a message to Slack API, and Slack API converts it to a message event, which is in the JSON form. This is done by Event API, and it sends it to your app. Your app may reside whether within the Slack itself or on coding platforms like Glitch and Grok, or Code Sandbox or REPL.IT, or it may reside on your cloud services like AWS or some other services on cloud. And then your app sends a response through Web API in the JSON format to the Slack API, and the Slack API sends the user the response back. There are other Slack APIs like Admin API for automating and simplifying administration of Slack organizations. SCIM APIs for user provisioning and management. Uh, Audit logs API for security information and event management tools. Status API provides a programmatic way to monitor the health of the Slack products. Discovery API, which is recently included, is now the data files for data files that are subject to legal hold. And there are other APIs like Files API, Calls API, etc. Now, Slack API specifications involves two APIs, major APIs, Open API and Async API. Open APIs are for synchronous interaction or one-to-one interactions, and asynchronous interactions are managed by Async API, which are one-to-many types of one-to-many interaction types. And the advantage of Async API is that it is language and protocol agnostic. It supports dozens of protocols like queuing protocols, WebSockets, Java messaging services, and other cloud services like AWS. Major usage of Async API is for, it does operations such as publish and subscribe, while it describes the channels and messages. Now, for an enterprise, usually there may be around 800 to 1,000 APIs. And for an 800 API enterprise, there may be like 300,000 plus possible interactions. And these are very well handled by Async API. Slack is supporting both the types of APIs that we discussed. Now, Events API, to call an API method in Slack app, an OAuth token need to be granted proper OAuth scope. So user must subscribe to event types which are tied to OAuth scopes, and they are of the format object : action : option. As for example, chat : write : user, or chat : write : bot. So Events API has built-in HTTP methods, and RTM API is what we already know, is that it is already included in Events API, and it's getting pretty much outmoded. However, it is still there. Some part of it is still there. There is like a very rich documentation available at https api.slack.com/events, which covers the, gives you details about required scopes, how it works, whether it works with the Events API or RTM API. There are example payloads and facts. And for bold code samples, you may check the documentation api.slack.com/tools/bolt. Now, Web API also has, like, besides get and post, calls, it also has a write method supporting JSON post of the type application/JSON, and the request URL is of the type slack.com/api/method_family.method. In fact, this Web API follows HTTPS TLS 1.2 and OAuth 2.0. Now, this OAuth 2.0 is already, customized by Slack as V2S, and that is Slack's own version of OAuth 2.0. So there are very rich Web API documentation also available online. It includes method access, HTTPS, Java, Python, JS. It has required scopes, content types, rate limiting tiers, facts, arguments, etc., etc., and sample codes. You can check them at api.slack.com/methods/method. Slack API has got very rich GitHub laboratory. About 58 projects are there. That includes SDKs for Bolt in JS, Java, Python, and Ruby. It has got excellent example codes. There are ready sample apps available. Also, if you wish to check the specifications of Slack API, you can go to github.com/Slack API/Slack-API-specs. Now, Slack API specification also has event wrappers and JSON schema within it that can be used for your generation of your sample payloads and testing with your coding and your apps. Slack is already allowing outsiders to use the evented APIs, and it is expanding and refining the schema and new examples coverage for all of the specifications. Thank you. May I just ask Jim to take over, please?
Okay, thank you so much, Bhoomin. That was a fantastic presentation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
And a really great introduction to the APIs. So thanks. And also thank you all for having me and for attending. It's great to be here. I would obviously much prefer to be there in person. It's been a number of years since I have been to Mumbai myself, but I can hear it in the background in Bhoomin's video there. So it's we're looking forward to getting out there again someday. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see here. Is everyone seeing a presentation that says Tasks app? All right. I'm going to assume that's a yes. All right. Great. So the introduction that Bhoomin gave was kind of a great overview of our APIs. And now we're going to talk about a specific example that we've been working on that you can take a look at. It's available on our GitHub repo that will show how you can actually put this to use. And so this is a sample tasks application that we've put together that kind of shows how you get things done with the Slack platform. As Bhoomin mentioned, my name is Jim Ray. I am a developer advocate at Slack. I've been at Slack for a little more than 5 years. And my pronouns are he and him. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you use the Slack platform, how you might use the Slack platform to kind of get work done, to build the kinds of applications that are going to help you get your best work done. And I'm going to use the example of this Tasks app that we've built to show that. So when we talk about the Slack platform, just to kind of start from the very beginning here, what is it all about? And so as I'm sure you may have heard before, Slack, the application, is all about helping you get your best work done with your colleagues. And the platform has a very similar mission, which is that we want to enable you to use the Slack platform, use our APIs to bring together all of the work that you do, not just in Slack, but in other places as well. And so we know that you've got information that exists in other tools. And so we want to enable you, developers, but also other people that are building on the Slack platform to bring that work into a single place. And we feel like Slack's a pretty good place to do that. Slack is where you're already communicating with your colleagues. And so by the ability to bring some of those other tools in, we've seen that to be really powerful and really transformative to how people are getting their work done. So the example that we're going to be using today is this tasks app that we have built. And part of what myself and the rest of my team do is we come out and we give presentations like this. We get to come out and meet our community. But also, we build things like sample applications. We help write the documentation. We work with our product development team on new features that they're building. And so one thing that we have put together here is this tasks application. This has been a kind of a joint effort across the entire team. And basically what it does is it's a very lightweight task management app. And it's something that's built right in Slack. And we feel like it's a pretty good example that showcases all of the features that you have available to your own kind of application development. We've tried to use as many of the APIs as we can to kind of show how this works. And as I mentioned, it's all open source. I've got a link here in just a second. But if you've ever used something like Jira or Asana or work streams to get your work done, and the way that those integrate into Slack, I want to show kind of a much lighter weight version of those types of tools. The task app that I'm going to be kind of going through here today is available. It's fully open source. It's available on our GitHub here, so it's Slack API/tasks-app. And so you can download that. We also take pull requests. And so if you have a feature request, even if you just have an idea for something but aren't sure how you might implement that yourself, go ahead and leave a comment, and we'll work on it together, all there in the open source. So now I want to kind of talk through how it's built, and I'm going to review a little bit. Bhoomin gave a really fantastic introduction to the APIs. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the specific APIs that we're using here, but also some of the tools that we make available that you might consider using as well. And the first of these is a framework that we call Bolt. And Bolt is built to essentially make it easy to build Slack applications. So you don't need to use Bolt. It's certainly not a requirement that anyone use our framework or even our SDKs. Any programming language that can understand and speak HTTP is something that you can use to build a Slack application. However, we have kind of taken a look at some of the community offerings and tried to figure out where we can kind of best support the kind of development that our community of developers is doing. And so we maintain a number of first-party SDKs in Java, JavaScript, and Python. And then we built this Bolt framework on top of those SDKs. So you can use the SDKs at kind of a low level, or you could use the Bolt framework at something of a higher level. And we kind of abstract out some of the difficult things like pagination, things like security. We manage a lot of that and offer some best practices for you. And so again, if you're a Java programmer, a JavaScript programmer, that's JavaScript or TypeScript actually, or a Python programmer, then we have SDKs and we have this Bolt framework available for you. And if you're interested in that, head on over to api.slack.com/tools/Bolt. We've got all kinds of documentation as well as the source code. And again, we do take pull requests. So if there've been a number of community contributions over the years that this has been available. So if you're interested in doing some open source development, then feel free to jump in there. So the Tasks app, this is kind of an example of the Tasks app itself. Now, by default, when you start a Bolt app, we let you kind of build however you're comfortable with that. However, what we've done with the Tasks app is build something that is a little bit more prescriptive. And so we have kind of an opinion about how Slack apps might want to work. It's maybe not necessarily something that would specifically work for you, but for the Tasks app specifically, we wanted something that we've heard from a lot of our developers is that they want some more guidance on how to on some of the specifics about how to build an app. How would you set up your directory? Where should the files go? What kind of testing frameworks? And so we've built a lot of that into the Tasks app as well. So feel free to kind of take a look at how we're suggesting you would go about building an app that has some complexity here. Simpler apps may not need all of the features that we've got there, but again, take a look there and offer suggestions if you have them. So when it comes to setting up, we're going to talk a little bit about kind of getting up and running and then some of the features of the platform that Tasks app uses. So the first thing to know is that we have a new feature available that we call manifests that works very similar to how other manifest tools that you might have used in other programming languages might work. But basically what a manifest is a YAML file that kind of programmatically describes your application. So you can enter all of the kind of metadata information, the title, the OAuth scopes that you're going to be requesting, the shortcuts that you might define for your application. You can describe all of that in code now. So if you've built on the Slack platform before, you might be familiar with the web interface that we have been using, where you go and you kind of fill out features and information about your application. Now you can do that format. And we make this available, so you can just download this manifest file and then go create a new app and then just paste this manifest file right in place. And then it's got all of the features set up for you and ready to go. The manifest file, the manifest format, by the way, is also really helpful if you are doing any kind of extensive testing or if you need to use it or deploy your application across multiple environments. So, so check out the manifest. It's a fairly new feature, and we're going to be adding and extending to that as a way to kind of make it easier to get started with a Slack application. So once you have your manifest file and once you've created your app, then go ahead and install the app on your workspace, and then you start interacting with the Slack APIs. And so as Bhoomin mentioned, he did a good job of kind of introducing the APIs there. We do have a number of APIs available to you. Primarily, the Tasks app uses our web API and our Events API. And the thing to understand about those two APIs is that they're the primary way that your applications are going to interact with the Slack platform. The web API is how your application will make requests. So for instance, if you want to post a message into a channel, which is what this describes here, then your application is going to be sending that API request to Slack. If you wanted to query some information, for instance, if you wanted to get a list of all of the conversations in a particular channel, you can see here that that this API call is calling out to our conversations history method. And it's asking for the most recent 50 messages posted in the channel. So it's how you would post into, but also how you would request information from Slack. So our web APIs make that available there. And then this is the kind of response that you would get back. So you send out and say I would like the most 50 recent messages posted into a channel, and then we're going to respond back with a JSON payload that your app can then parse and decide to do something with. So, so pretty standard API stuff. We use JSON as the protocol primarily, and everything happens over HTTP. The other thing to note there is that you're limited to the scopes requests. So I think Bhoomin went over that. We're using OAuth 2. We stick to the OAuth 2 standard for the most part. And so whenever you install your application, your app requests certain OAuth scopes. And then based on those OAuth scopes, that determines which of the API methods that you can use. If you need to use additional API methods than the ones you've already got scopes for, then you just need to request additional scopes. So we have a whole bunch of these API methods. There are literally hundreds of them. They require all manner of different scopes, and so we detail all of those on our documentation site right here. So that's the web API. The next API that we take a lot of advantage of in the Tasks app here is the what we call the Events API. And so this is it's kind of the inverse of the way that the web API works. With the Events API, what your app does is your app at installation time, your app tells us what are the events that you are interested in hearing more about from Slack. So you might want to know every time a new user joins a channel or every time somebody uses an emoji reaction. So you specify which of those events. And again, you need to request the proper scopes at installation time. And then when that event happens, proactively send that information to you. So what this means is that your application isn't having to constantly pull Slack's platform, but actually you can just sit and you essentially set up a URL and you give that URL to us. And then anytime the event that you're interested in happens, then we'll just send a JSON payload to you so that you can then be proactive about that. And so again, we have a number of event types here. So the app home open, we'll talk about the different surfaces that are available inside your application. So that's anytime somebody clicks into the app home space, then we're going to send an event API to your application, and then you respond back to us with something. So in the event that the app home gets opened, then you're going to respond back most likely with a payload that says, display this information in the app home space. So we've got a number of APIs. The events API and the web APIs. Those are the two primary ways that most of the applications that you build are going to interact. Now, if you are building for a specific use case, maybe you are an administrator of your Slack workspace. We do have some admin APIs. We have a set of SCIM APIs that follow the SCIM standard. So if you're doing lots of provisioning or anything like that, if you're doing e-discovery, for instance, if you work for a company that has lots of compliance issues, then we have a whole suite of e-discovery APIs available as well. So head over to api.slack.com/APIs, and we'll give you a list of all of the APIs that are available there. So that's kind of an overview of those APIs. Now, when it comes to the actual Tasks app itself, so the primary thing that you are going to want to kind of manage at the beginning is how the users of your application kind of kick things off, how they interact with your app. And sort of the primary way that they're going to do that, most likely, is with something that we call shortcuts. And you've probably seen shortcuts if you're a Slack user in various places within Slack. There are really two primary ways our application can define a shortcut. And the first of these is what we call a message shortcut. And that's something that actually gets attached to the message itself, but also has the full context of the message. And so in that, the kind of the 3-button popover button right there, you can actually insert your own commands into there as a developer. And this is really handy for things like the task application. So if you're having a conversation with one of your colleagues and you want to go kind of back and forth, and then you decide that you come to a kind of a conclusion in the conversation and you decide that you need to assign that base to someone, well, you might want to include the context of that conversation. So I'm going to say assign a task to a person, and I also want to include the context of that and that right from there. And then we have kind of the concept of global shortcuts as well. And so the global shortcuts are where the user will actually invoke that anywhere from within Slack. So if you just kind of want to generically create a new task, then you can invoke that right from that that kind of global shortcuts command panel that shows up down in the message pane there. And then you can just kind of generically assign a task here. And so we've got an example that showcases how to use the global shortcut, and then as well as using the message shortcut. And so if you want to include the context of the message itself, then you might include, key that task assignment off of a message. And what we do here is we bring the context of that message forward. So if I'm going to say, use this to assign a task to someone, then we'll go ahead and we'll pre-fill in some of the information. We'll take the text of that message, and we'll fill in the details of the task as well. And we might include a link back to that so you can refer back to it later. And we might also assume that you want to assign the task to the person who generated that message. So we might go ahead and fill that out as well. So those are shortcuts and how you can use those to kind of initiate the interaction with your application. Next up is a framework that we call BlockKit, and BlockKit is the kind of user interface library that we have available. And so the important thing to understand about user interfaces in Slack is it really is very similar to kind of assembling blocks of functionality. And so BlockKit is how you as the developer kind of define the user interface of your application. And you can see what that looks like here. So in this is the home space of the application. And you can see it's got a couple of different blocks. And the first of those is this row of buttons up top. And so, those are interactive buttons that you can define what happens when somebody clicks one of those buttons. And then next, there is the list of open tasks that the user has available to them. And you can see they've got the checkboxes and everything. And so, those blocks just kind of stack on top of each other. They work in the context of your browser or in your desktop application. They also work automatically in mobile. And you as a developer don't need to do anything differently here. All you need to do is define and say, hey, put the blocks in this order, and then Slack will take care of that, and we'll figure out the context that block is being displayed. It also works in dark mode, of course. And so you can see here that we've defined the same interface for both the desktop application, and they're all set to go there, depending on the context. We have a number of blocks available, and we've got a team that is working on including more of those. And so you can do everything from, just define a section and kind of lay out the sections of your application and different pieces of text. You can add interactivity. You can add things like interactive date pickers. Now, if you're coming at Slack development from front-end web development, you know that a date picker is kind of an annoying thing to build. You either have to go out there and find like a React component, or you have to write the JavaScript yourself. Well, we have taken care of that, and we've built that component for you. All you have to do is say, drop the date picker right here. And next up, we've got surfaces. And so surfaces are the various places that the blocks that you define can show up inside of an application. And the most common surface that you are right now, if you're a Slack user at all, is what we call the message surface. And ever since the earliest days of Slack and the Slack platform, applications have been able to define messages that go into the message surface. And as we saw with BlockKit, applications can actually define messages that look a little bit different from the kinds of messages that you might be able to compose as a human user. So the bots and the apps that you install, they have some additional functionality that you as a human might not necessarily have, such as the ability to attach a button or to create sections and add some a little bit of additional flair there. And so so that's the first surface and probably the most common and familiar one. The next surface is what we call modals. And a modal window is this kind of temporary space that is only displayed to a single user after you've clicked a button and now this pops up. I'm going to point out just for kind of security and also just kind of general UI niceties. I think everyone has been on the web and you get these modals that pop up without you doing anything. Incredibly annoying, but it's only possible to create one of these modal windows if the user has first interacted with something. So they have to click a button first. But the purpose of these modal windows is for you to be able to, the kind of most common purpose is for you to be able to kind of collect some structured information. And so you put these kind of form fields in there, and then you, as the developer, can collect this structured information, and then we bundle all of that up in JSON, and we send that to your application. This is much nicer than having to kind of have a back-and-forth chat-style interaction with a user when all you want to do is just kind of collect some information from them. So modals are a great way to gather input from users. And then finally, I'd mentioned this before, but we have this home space. And a home space is where you, as the developer, can kind of define a user interface that is going to be very familiar, but also a place for your users to get started and kind of interact with your app. And so if I go into the home space of the Tasks app, for instance, I'm going to see all of the tasks that have been assigned to me, but I've also got some options there to create a new task, or to see my open tasks, or even my previous completed tasks. And what's nice about this is that it's actually this view gets generated in real time whenever a specific user opens up this interface. So as I mentioned before, there's an event that we send to you, and the context of that event includes the user who opened it. So what this means is that your application can display a home space that is specific to a user. So in this case, in the tasks space, you can show them only the tasks that are assigned to them, or only the tasks that they have assigned to other people. And so, it's not just this kind of generic view that anybody's going to see, but it's actually something that is specific to that user. An application that I use many times every day is our Google Calendar app, and it has the same kind of a view. I go into the home view of my Google Calendar app, I'm going to see just my calendar, what I've got going that day. And then we've also made available, in addition to things like our SDKs and our frameworks, we've got some tools that are available to you as developers to kind of help make the art of creating these UIs a little bit easier. The first of these is one that we call BlockKit Builder, and this is a web application that you can use to compose those BlockKit interfaces. And so, just head over to the BlockKit Builder site, and you can actually drag and drop all of the various blocks that we have available, and then we'll automatically generate the JSON for you. You can also you can pick the context. So if the context of your the block that you want to generate is inside of a message, then you can pick that context. If it's a home space or if it's a modal space, then we'll dynamically adjust the user interface there, and we'll generate the proper JSON for you. This is really handy if you're working on a team where maybe you have a designer that has some ideas about maybe they're not necessarily a coder, and what they can do is design out the and then copy out the JSON, send that over to the backend developer, and then the developer can take that JSON and then just swap out the the variable interpolation that you want to use, and say like, okay, here is where I'm going to insert some text. And so BlockKit Builder is a really great way to kind of test out your interfaces. We also have a tool available called the Slack Developer Tools. And this is an application, this is a Slack app that you install in your workspace. And so if you've got a test workspace that you're using for developing your apps, then you can install this Slack Developer Toolkit. It's available from our app directory. And then we'll let you do things like inspect messages. So if there's another app that you have installed in your workspace, and it generates a message that you think is pretty cool, and you want to kind of figure that out. This basically adds kind of like view source functionality that you might be familiar with on the web. Message exactly, and it will show you the JSON that is used to generate that message. It's also really helpful if you're doing your own debugging as well. There's a couple of other handy tools that are built into the Slack Developer Tools as well. The ability to look up API methods right from within Slack instead of having to switch back and forth is pretty handy as well. So what's next? If any of this has been exciting to you, then please, by all means, head over to our GitHub, clone the application, clone the Tasks app. We've also got some other sample apps that you might be interested in checking out. But right now, the Tasks app is probably the most comprehensive and kind of prescriptive way that we have available for understanding Slack application development if you're interested in using the Bolt framework. So go grab that from our GitHub. And as I'd mentioned before, we do accept pull requests, so we would love to have your contributions. The documentation is available at api.slack.com. We have a fantastic tool team that built out all of those docs. And then we have over 1,000 services that we interface with, and so feel free to check it out. So thank you. for inviting me here. It was a real pleasure to meet all of you and to discuss. And I think now we're going to open it up for questions. So I'll stop sharing my screen and head over to the AMA channel.